there are those who are totally baffled and confused in various ways when it comes to the biblical scriptures due to the unlimited amount of information available on the internet, YouTube, social media, etc. From the oldest ancient myths of the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, Mesopotamians, the Hebrews or Awer, A-W-E-R, and the Chaldeans, and their varying stories or myths of creation, a great deluge or flood, the epic of the king, legend Gilgamesh, the epic of Gilgamesh, and their mythical Upanishad, Atrahasis, Sudra, etc. Everyone knows as Noah. In the Paleo-Hebrew or Palestine, there was the name N apostrophe AH, which is Nah, but it sounded very much like Noah, so they went with it. As well as the said latter cuneiform tablets, the pictographs, the cuneiform tablets that followed, left behind by these long dead ancient civilizations, as well as these pictographs, these copper scrolls, etc., whatever's been found archaeologically. And finally, the said original, ancient, very old manuscripts. In the original ancient, very old Tab Ashrit, or Aramaic, Tab Ivri, Hebrew, and Koine Greek. Let's not forget the said original, ancient, very old manuscripts of the Syriac, the Galilean Aramaic, and Neo-Hebrew, Paleo-Hebrew, etc. And the said modern translations, the modern Americanized English translations, or versions, transliterations, and interpolations from these said originals, these said original languages, put out into the world by such Bible societies as the American Bible Society, and similar with their varying translated variants, translations, variations, full of revisions, full of errors, corruptions, omitted verses, chapters. For example, the New World Order translations, deliberate additions by verses not found in the original ancient, very old manuscripts. These versions known us are the NIV, the new NIV, the ASV, RSV, the Message, the new KJV, the 21st century KJV, etc., etc. The Jewish Torah, Tanakh, Mishnah, etc. The Roman Catholic Douay Bible, their Bible versions with the Apocrypha added, the Protestant fundamentalist Bible versions from the Seventh-day Adventist, Ellen G. White books, whichever one she wrote, Desire of Ages, etc. The Jehovah's Witness New World Translation, the Mormon Bible, and so forth. The protagonists, let's just call them that, for the hell of it. No, let's just call them YouTube influencers. YouTube influencers seem to, or rather appear to be coming around to our realization that all they ranted about in regards to the information they've talked about, they've gathered and they've talked about it via their personal YouTube channels, live after being totally informing, are totally baffled by it all, troubled by all that information they've gathered from different sources, and the experts who have been invited and appeared on their show and did their rant on their ideology, their beliefs, what the Bible's saying, what it's not saying, etc., etc. One in particular, Gnostic Informer, recently did a video where he came to state, to hell with it all, I'm going back to my fundamentalist origins, or my roots, which he was first influenced by. He was a fundamentalist originally, then became a Gnostic Informant. So much he revealed, so we started to think, well, it's like he might have to change his YouTube label name to Fundamentalist Informant. It's like, Another, the infamous myth Vision, who has expressed being baffled by his latest video, by all that knowledge he's gained, accumulated via the various myths, from the various myths, pagan philosophers, theological experts, historians, and the atheists he invited onto his show, these atheist scholars, etc. He's invited to his show to talk, discuss the Bible and their many theories, claims, ideologies, theologies, and often why they are hardcore atheists, or why they de-Christianize themselves and embrace atheism. Like he gets like well-known, recognized agnostic atheist scholar, theologian Bart D. Ehrman. He doesn't believe in God, but he believes that Jesus the Christ existed, but not as the Christians, the Jesus that the Christians worship today, or venerate today, revere today. He's a very, very different kind of Jesus. We often seem to think that it might be a convenience Jesus, gimme style Jesus. Give me what I want when I want it. Give it to me now, and we might think about worshipping you. In the meantime, we just pretend to. Okay, these are done through the prosperity churches, the charismatic churches, etc. And look at them; they all got busted. They're groomers, molesters, money hungry, etc., etc. It's all coming to light, right? Of what they've been doing. They've been tricking the people, taking all their money and telling them all this gobbledygook, and pretending to speak in tongues, just going blibbity 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 blibbity. Yeah, you're just faking it. And they got caught out. They finally got caught out. So we began to ponder along with these particular influencers, YouTube influencers, etc., that having all these revelations or these realizations. Damn, why am I so baffled? Why am I so confused with what I've got all this information, etc., etc., and so forth? How could we, the Ministry of the Real Truth, help them, help people like them, inside the land of confusion or the Tower of Baffle, come to a full circle to perhaps a God-inspired, God-convicting revelation via our channel, and through the original ancient, very old Tav Asheret, or Lishana Artigas the Prayer, the sacred scribal language spoken by God to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, the Tav Ivri, or original ancient, very old Hebrew manuscripts, and the original ancient, very old Koine Greek, and even perhaps the original ancient, very old Tav Hotep, if we get hold of that, and Lashon Kadesh, original ancient Hebrew, or said to be, right, that people are using today. Then it hit us like a Mike Tyson uppercut and kick in the nutsacks. We had previously created a video on a book that we'd found in the public domain, public access. An alarm clock went off. We realised this book, this video about this book, verifies that all the mythos of the ancient Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, Mesopotamians, the Awer, A-W-E-R, or Hebrews, and Chaldeans of Ur of Chaldea, or Chaldee, where Abraham the patriarch was born, adopted, then adapted the ancient stories of the flood, deluge, the epic of creation, Upantishim, Atrahasis, Zeustra, etc., from them. Okay, changing details here and there from their language originally into their language from the original languages over the centuries, from the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, etc. But then we realised, no, we're wrong. It's the other way around. It's the reverse. They didn't copy it. These Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, etc. copied it. Okay, it was all originally in the Hebrew. We have this video of this book that will verify that. That all came from the ancient Hebrew, Aramaic language, or Aramaic Hebrew language. Before these ancient civilizations existed and came to be known, powerful, mighty, and civilized, a civilization, etc. So let's go and find this particular video on that source, that video we created about that book, that revealed this to us, the Ministry of the Real Truth. Okay, we found it, and the name of the video is "The following video will both shock and rock," because we believed it would once we found the information. Okay, here's the latest video of Mythvism. We're still going to look at that. We've only got halfway through it, so we're going to go over it again later to try to, by listening to what he has to say and then trying to work out what he's getting at. He may be baffled and confused, and he's hearing, probably could be a result of God inspiring him, God revealing to him, revelations, that revealing himself to him through his realizations, right? His confusions, etc. That let it go. Let it God, as the saying goes. Okay? What's it? Let it go, let God. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so we got this video here. The following video will both shock and rock. Okay, and here's a description we put under here. This is our video, so there shouldn't be any copyright strike or anything like that. It's from our own channel, unless we want to snitch on ourselves. And it reads here, ancient epic cuneiform tablet myths not originally in the Sumerian. They weren't originally from there, or the Akkadian, or the Babylonian. All those myths weren't originally from there. A Hebrew deluge story in cuneiform and other epic fragments in the Pierpont Morgan Library. That's where they are today. By Albert Tobias Clay, 1866 to 1925. Pierpont Morgan Library. The ancient creation epic of Gilgamesh and the great deluge myths were not originally in the ancient Sumerian, Akkadian, or Babylonian language, but in the Hebrew, Aramaic, cuneiform language, or Aramaic Hebrew. According to researcher and author Albert T. Clay, in the book A Hebrew Deluge Story in Cuneiform Part 3. And we found that on internetarchive.org. Okay. And we're going to play this video, our video, so you can hear that information. And it decided to climb up on us. Yale Oriental Series, Researchers, Volume 5, Part 3, A Hebrew Deluge Story in Cuneiform by Albert T. Clay. Who was Albert T. Clay? Albert Tobias Clay, December 4, 1866 to September 14, 1925, was an American professor, historian, and Semitic linguist. Semitic people or Semites is an obsolete term for an ethnic, cultural, or racial group associated with people of the Middle East, including Arabs, Jews, Akkadians, and Phoenicians. The terminology is now largely unused outside the grouping. He was professor of Assyriology as well as a linguist. And Assyriology is known as cuneiform studies of ancient Near East studies, the archaeological, anthropological, historical, and linguistic study of the cultures that use cuneiform writing. The field covers pre-dynastic Mesopotamia, Syria, etc. And he was also a professor of Babylonian literature at Yale University. Akkadian literature is the ancient literature written in the Akkadian language in Mesopotamia during the period spanning the Middle Bronze Age to the Iron Age. And he served as a founding curator of the Yale Babylonian collection, an independent branch of the Yale University Library, housed on the Yale University campus at Sterling Memorial Library in New Haven, Connecticut, United States. So he had a range of qualifications. Background. Albert Tobias Clay was born in Hanover, New York County, Pennsylvania. He graduated from Franklin Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania during 1889 and from the Lutheran Theological Seminary at Gettysburg in 1892. He was subsequently ordained into the Lutheran ministry. This is his career. Clay went on to become a teaching fellow in the Syrian. What's a teaching fellow? An individual at a higher education institution, including universities, whose role involves teaching and potentially pedagogic research. The work done by teaching fellows can vary enormously from institution to institution. So he was a teaching fellow in Assyrian and instructor in the Hebrew language at the University of Pennsylvania in 1895 to 99. He returned as lecturer in Semitic archaeology after being an instructor in Old Testament theology at the Chicago Lutheran Seminary. He was assistant professor of Semitic philology and archaeology 1903 to 09 and full professor 1 year, and so forth. And he had a huge range of books we found online, at least 30 or more. Well, let's say 20 to 30. Is his personal life, its references, note, external links. Yale Oriental Series, Researchers, Volume 5, Part 3. A Hebrew Deluge Story in Cuneiform and Other Epic Fragments in the Pierpont Morgan Library by Albert T. Clay. Forward. The title of this book tells its own story, naming that an ancient Hebrew flood tradition was written in cuneiform. This story of the deluge or flood found its way into Babylonia, where it was made to largely conform to the Akkadian dialect, which fully portrays its origins. It came from the same source from where the Hebrew traditions came, mainly from the people who lived in Amurru, Mesopotamia and Syria, called the Amorites. As was the case in pre-Mosaic days, and to a large extent in early Israel, when henotheism prevailed. What is henotheism? We can look that up. Henotheism. Never heard that one. Belief in the supremacy of one God without denying the existence of others. Primitive religion in which each of the several divinities is regarded as independent and is worshipped without reference to the rest. Belief in or worship of one deity without denying the existence of other deities. Henotheism is the worship of a single supreme God that does not deny the existence or possible existence of other deities that may not be worshipped. Friedrich Schelling, 1775 to 1854. Coined the word, and Frederick Welcher, 1784 to 1868, used it to depict primitive monotheism among ancient Greeks. Henotheism, from the Greek theos or one God, refers to religious belief systems that accept the existence of many gods, such as polytheism, but worship one deity as supreme. Such belief systems have been found throughout history and across the world's culture. So would the Christian religion be that like that? In regards to Jesus, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Okay, these are dictionary meanings. Britannica, which is over 250 years old, so I guess you could trust that. Henotheism is the worship of one God while acknowledging the existence of others. And so forth. The story of the flood found its way into Babylonia, where it was made to largely conform to the Akkadian dialect, which fully portrays its origins. It came from the same source from where the Hebrew traditions came from, mainly from the people who lived in Amuru, Mesopotamia and Syria, called the Amorites, as was the case in pre-Mosaic days, and to a large extent in early Israel, when henotheism prevailed. God is the foremost deity. We learn from this tradition, and also from its redaction written centuries later, that a long famine preceded the deluge or flood, which is not referred to in the Old Testament, that the famine had been sent because men had multiplied and also because of their clamour, reminding us of the causes given for the deluge in the Old Testament. Clamour probably meaning their following their own ways, doing their own thing, turning their back on God and doing ungodly, wicked sins. So that's why God caused this flood to wipe them out. The great importance of this inscription, which was copied about the time of Abraham from an older tablet, together with other facts here presented within this book, is that it will require that the prevailing view be abandoned that the Hebrew traditions were borrowed from Babylonia. This involves many scholarly works written in recent decades upon the early history of Israel. It has been generally held that these stories are of Babylonian origin, that Canaan was a domain of Babylonian culture in the time of Moses, and that Israel had assimilated this foreign culture as well as its religion, feathers and all. Not only is the Israelitish cult held to be dependent upon the Babylonian, but also many of the chief characters are said to have descended from Babylonian mythology. In Germany, where these views developed, some scholars have gone to great extremes. Only a change of names had taken place, and Marduk or Bel was transformed into Christ. In America, a more moderate position has generally been accepted, in which the extreme views were toned down and the Pan-Babylonian theory made more palatable. Nevertheless, it is generally held that these traditions had been brought from Babylonia in the time of Abraham, or in the Amarna period, or at the time of the exile, and that many of the characters had their origin in myth. The writer's thesis in brief is that the Arabian origin of the Semites living in ancient Syria and Babylonia, including the Hebrews, is baseless, but that the antiquity of the Amorite civilization is very great, and also the assertion that the culture and religion of Israel were borrowed from Babylonia is without any foundation, for they were indigenous and that the Semites who migrated to Babylonia with their culture were mainly from Amuru. In the judgment of the writer, the material presented in this little monograph, as well as in his recently published Empire of the Amorites, will require a very extensive readjustment of many views bearing upon the subject, as well as the abandonment of many others. Moreover, it also has bearings of a far-reaching character on many other Old Testament problems. Amuru, called the land of the Amorites, it might be added, is a geographical term which was used in ancient times for the great stretch of territory between Babylonia and the Mediterranean. By reason of its products and its position, this land had been attractive to other peoples ever since. One strove to obtain what the other possessed, resulting in almost innumerable invasions and conflicts taking place in this land. Within the historical period, we know that the Babylonians, Egyptians, Hittites, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Turks, and other peoples controlled this territory. It should be added that this country in turn also prevailed at times over other lands, notably Babylonia and Egypt. In these pages of this book, we have evidence that one of its rulers conquered Babylonia as early as 4000 BC. This country has always represented ethnologically a great mixture. Linguistically, as far as is known, a Semitic language has always prevailed in this great stretch of territory. The Amorite or Hebrew language, being the oldest of which we have knowledge, was followed by the Aramaic. Well, we're not too sure if that Hebrew actually is the older language. Maybe it is in the Brita or the book of Genesis, where it talks about Abraham and the Awer or the Hebrews, and Abraham, being in the Ur of Chaldea, born there, and he was promised by God this land of abundance, milk and honey, and he made this journey, but he ended up in Haran because his father's brother died, Terah. He died there. Haran was named after his father, right? Or so his father's uncle. Excavations at one or two well-selected sites. This country has always represented ethnologically a great mixture. Linguistically, as far as is known, a Semitic language has always prevailed in this great stretch of territory. The Amorite or Hebrew language, being the oldest of which we have knowledge, was followed by the Aramaic and later by the Arabic, which now prevails. To what extent the Akkadian dialect was used in certain parts and what script was employed in the early period as yet undetermined. Excavations at one or two well-selected sites will throw light on this and many other questions and furnish us with the material whereby we will be able to reconstruct many chapters of its early history. And he gives credit to other people. Contents page. An ancient Hebrew deluge story. This fragment of a large tablet was published in text transliteration and translation nearly 25 years ago, before it had come to the possession of the Pierpont Morgan Library collection of Babylonian inscriptions. In the meantime, many other translations had appeared. Moreover, owing to the form of which the tablet had been presented, due to its not having been thoroughly cleaned, its importance has only been slightly appreciated. While it was understood that it had the same general application as legend preserved in the British Museum, known as the Ea and Atrahasis legend, and belonged to a later period, the latter, owing to its fragmentary condition, could not be said to refer to the deluge or flood. Moreover, while it was apparent that the present text did refer to the deluge or flood, it was considered even by one who examined the tablet that it contained little more than a few phrases and words without any coherent connection. Further study, however, as will be seen from what follows, reveals the fact that this is a mistake, that it is a part of an old version of what should properly be called the Atrahasis epic, which is a very ancient Hebrew or Amorite deluge story or flood story, and that the so-called Ea and Atrahasis legend of the Assyrian period, which has also been translated by a number of scholars, is a late redaction of it. The later version or redaction was put into a magical setting for incantation purposes. In the appendix will be found the transliteration and translation of all the versions of this deluge story or stories, both cuneiform and Greek. The ancient dated text is designated as A and the late redaction as B. A small fragment in the British Museum, ostensibly from a version of the Atrahasis epic, for it mentions the hero's name, which is also written in the late period, furnishes us with a conversation between the god Ea and Atrahasis concerning the construction of the ship, or the ark, and with what it should be loaded. This is designated in the appendix C. The hero of the other and well-known deluge story, which in the late period has been woven into the Gilgamesh epic, is Atrahasis. But his title, which is better known in connection with the story, is Napishtim, or Uta Napishtim. This is designated as E. Besides these versions or fragments of versions, there is also known a little fragment of 13 partially preserved lines written probably in the Kassite period, about 1400 BC, in which neither the name of a god nor that of the hero is preserved. This is designated as F. The deluge story handed down by Berossus, in which the hero is Xisuthros,
which name represents a transportation of the elements of Atrahasis. For example, Hasis Atra is still another version of the epic. This is designated as G. The only dated version written in cuneiform is one in the Pierpoint Morgan collection. It was copied from a still earlier inscription by a junior scribe named Azag Aya on the 28th day of Shebet in the 11th year of Ami Zaduga, 1966 BC, which date is about 1300 years earlier than the time of the library of Ashurbanipal, 668 to 626 BC, to which the late redaction of it, now in the British Museum, belonged. The original from which the scribe copied had already been injured in the 12th line, which is indicated by the word hebus, broken. How much earlier the previous text was written cannot be surmised or determined, but there are reasons for believing it is a very ancient legend, probably written 2,000 years earlier. Unfortunately, the tablet has been injured since it was first published 25 years ago, when they probably translated it and then put those findings into print. Several small pieces have been lost from the surface of it. In the copy of the inscription given in the appendix, these parts are based upon the original copy made 25 years ago and are indicated by small ink dots easily recognised. Here's a selection from the early version lines 1 to 19. Words are all found in the first 19 lines of the text. Naturally, the words currently used in Babylonia as well as in Amuru are not discussed. It is to be noted that the hero Atrahasis bears an Amorite name. This name, according to the footnotes here, this name is generally considered to be two words meaning exceedingly wise, the very wise one. While the Babylonian used it as synonymous with those words, it was nevertheless a personal name, and this does not seem to have been its original meaning. Names compounded with Atar and Atar, also written Atra, Atram, with and without the determination, are numerous among West Semitic names. Compare Atar, BD, etc., etc. The Babylonians, in making use of these West Semitic legends, having their own word Atru, meaning surplus, abundant, made an etymological play upon the name, as was done so frequently in the Old Testament, interpreting it in their own legends as being synonymous with very wise, as is done in the Etana and Adapu epics. It will be noticed that in the Adapu fragment discussed, the word Atrahasisa is not written grammatically as two words in a sentence, but is looked upon as a name synonymous with the idea clever one. The same is true in the Etana legend, where Atrahasisa is in apposition with Admu Siiru, which is the nominative, is in the nominative case. The fact that the determinative for man is placed before, especially in this early period, makes it impossible to regard it here as being an epithet for a hero bearing another name. These facts and others which follow, especially those in connection with the name Ilu, God, for the chief's deity name in this legend, prove conclusively that this was originally a Hebrew, or Awer, A-W-E-R, people who made a crossing, who crossed over, who made a journey, i.e. Abraham to the land of Canaan. This was originally a Hebrew or Amorite deluge story or flood story. If this is an Amorite legend, we should expect to find also in the work of the late redactor or glossarist Amorite words which had not been adopted by the Semitic Babylonians, and in this we are not disappointed. A comparison of the two texts shows how the redactor inserted glosses or parallel phrases in connection with words here, etc. And then he goes into a deeper explanation of all these words. The story The legend had been Akkadianized before the early text was written in 1966 BC. In a long period which preceded, it had suffered many changes when redactors had made the original Amorite text conform to the dialect in current use in Babylonia. Fortunately, as has been seen, all the words peculiar to the West had not been eliminated. And this process was seen to go on in the writing of personal names of those coming fresh from the West in the Hammurabi period. For example, names like Ishbi-Ura, Ishme, Dagan, etc. had become Akkadianized, but on the arrival from the West of others bearing those names, it's found that they were written Yashbi-Ura, Yashme, Dagan, etc. Even the position of the verbs in the sentence has suffered changes, for while they are frequently found at the beginning, as in Hebrew, they are also found placed at the end or indifferently in the sentence, as is the case in Akkadian. The story of the deluge, or the flood, is contained in the Gilgamesh epic. Certain scholars maintain embraces elements of more than one tradition. They say Napishtim is the hero of the epic, yet it nevertheless also refers to Atrahasis. This has prompted some scholars to identify him with Napishtim, while others consider that, as has already been noted, in this late story the name Atrahasis is used as synonym for a very wise man, as in the case in several of the epics. However, it seems to the writer that the situation is entirely misunderstood. As stated above, footnote 16, Atrahasis is a personal name. The passage the wise one, Atrahasis, could hardly be translated the wise one, the very wise, and it doubtless shows also where the later etymologists got their idea for their play upon the name. In all the versions except the Sumerian, the hero's name is Atrahasis. After the flood, he was given a title. Although not fully understood, it is or Uta Napishtim, Rukim, Rugam, also Ina Rugi, which in the Sumerian paraphrase is written Zi'u Suru. This title has been variously translated: he who lengthened the days of life, he who made life long of days, etc. Certainly this is not a personal name, which fact the Gilgamesh story fully recognises. When Ea, in the Gilgamesh story E 196, tells the gods how the hero learned that the flood would occur, he does not say, I made Napishtim see a dream, for at that time he had not been thus designated. But Ea says, I made Atrahasis see a dream. This is one of the many gods, right? The pantheon of gods. One of the gods in the pantheon. That was his name. He had not yet earned the title. In short, this is no confusion of names, as some have inferred, but an exact statement, and the use of the title instead of the name in the Sumerian paraphrase is a proof that it is borrowed from the Semitic legend. This writer has previously maintained, simply on a basis of the personal names found in the Gilgamesh epic story, that it is largely from a Hebrew or Amorite original. And then he says, let us inquire whether a study of the language used in its composition will betray its original source. The first Hebrew word to be noted in the Gilgamesh epic story is Niseratu. Second E9. This word, as far as known to the writer, was not in current use in Akkadian, but the Hebrew word meaning hidden thing from this root is known in the Old Testament. See Isaiah 48:6. The word for part of the boat, called la'an, E60, which was the hull or bottom, is Hebrew from the root lun, or lun, to lodge, doubtless because there is where the people lodged. That's where the people lodged. The word used for the roof of the boat, namely see, E60 is Amorite. See note in appendix. And he goes deep into all of these words' meaning of the words. There are other Hebrew words discussed in the notes beneath the translations, some of which are tentatively offered, while others are reasonably certain. There are also glosses. Doubtless, further study will reveal more which were really, if ever, used in Akkadian. If the Napishtim story was originally written in Sumerian or even in Akkadian, certainly it becomes necessary to explain how these foreign Hebrew words, even in this late version of the Assyrian period, came to be used in the epic. And it was the writer's opinion that no other conclusion could be arrived at but that this deluge story, flood story, which probably embraces some elements indigenous to Babylonia, was mainly an Amorite legend which the Semites from Amuru brought with them from the west. Since we know that other peoples of the early period had deluge or flood stories, it would be precarious to say that the Sumerians and the Babylonians did not have their own, especially as this land must have suffered even more than others, and because this legend refers to Shuri-Papak, King Shuri-Papak, right, that city, Shuri-Papak. But with this exception, there is nothing in the Gilgamesh epic story that can be said to be distinctively Babylonian. Even the word translated reed, hut, is very probably an archaic West Semitic word. And on the other hand, there are, as we have seen, a number of Hebrew words used in epic which were not current in Babylonia, which together with other facts shows that the story is mainly Amorite. Moreover, it is not at all improbable that reference to the dolmen in the Sumerian version, if that name is to be identified with the region of the Persian Gulf, is also a part of the local colouring of the legend received. Since it has been shown that the Sumerian story whose hero was named Zeusuru is connected with the Napishtim story, and that it was probably written at a time when Sumerian as a spoken language had survived in a more or less corrupt style, sometime between 2300 and 1300 BC. It seems, in light of the above, until other evidence is forthcoming, the only conclusion at which we can arrive is that it must be regarded as a short paraphrase of the Amorite story, which may include some features of a Sumerian tradition. It has even taken over the Akkadian word Puru, which, as we have seen, had displaced the Amorite Buru. The fact that Sumerian was used for official communications, for legal documents, as well as for literature in general in certain Babylonian cities in the latter half of the 3rd millennium BC, makes it possible to understand why such very ancient stories which had been brought into Babylonia from Amuru should also be found and written in Sumerian. Nearly every subscription from Nippur of this period is written in Sumerian. It was the legal and liturgical language. In some of the neighbouring cities it was not so. For example, Saqqara, which probably became the ancient version of the Amorite Atrahasis epic. This city was preeminently Semitic. It has been claimed that the little Semitic fragment containing 13 partially preserved lines, now in the Museum of the University of Pennsylvania, USA, was originally written in Sumerian, and that it was brought to Canaan at the time Abraham left his home on the Euphrates and moved westward. But the few lines of this supposed Sumerian story are full of Hebrew words, which were not in current use in Akkadian. Well, yeah, that would be right. If he, with the Hebrews, the Awa, him being a Chaldean, is born in Ur of Chaldea, made this journey, crossed over to this other land, eventually into Canaan, right? Yeah, sure. It must be admitted that it seems strange that the Akkadian translator of this supposed Sumerian story should have used so many Hebrew words which were not in current use in Babylonia, in making the translation of these few lines into Akkadian. And this writer fully appreciated the fact that at any time cuneiform inscriptions may be found in Babylonia, which will contain examples of these Hebrew words, other than those already known, because of the flow of Western Semites in nearly all periods into this land. Nevertheless, it will be possible to continue to maintain that they were not in current use in the Akkadian dialect. Nearly all scholars who have published discussions of the biblical deluge or flood traditions in recent years, it's prior to this book being written, had conceded that they are of Babylonian origin. This view can be said to have been very generally accepted by scholars. Some hold that these stories were brought from Babylonia to Canaan by Abraham. Others say that they were transmitted to the west in the Maurya or Amana period, but the great majority of scholars hold that knowledge of them was obtained in Babylonian at the time of the exile. Two arguments are generally advanced for this position. The one is the Great Age of Babylonian civilization, which involved the idea that civilization in the West had only developed a little before 2000 BC by Arabs from Arabia, and the other argument is based on the frequency of inundations in Babylonia, which gave rise to the so-called nature myths. In 1909, the present writer endeavoured to show that the Babylonian origin of the biblical deluge or flood stories was without any foundation, but that they were indigenous to the West, and that on the other hand the Babylonian story of the deluge, as preserved in the Gilgamesh epic, contained West Semitic elements, showing that no other conclusion could be arrived at but that extensive influences had been felt from Amuru. Clay, Amuru, the home of the Northern Semites, footnote at the bottom. These discoveries show that there is no need to find the origin of the biblical stories of Babylonia because of the theory that the West in the early period did not have an indigenous literature and did not have a civilization. The present version and other data presented in the discussion in another chapter forever disprove this hypothesis and requires its abandonment. Moreover, it is necessary that a general readjustment be made of views advanced by Pan-Babylonians and Pan-Egypto-Babylonians, whose positions have been based upon the supposed Arabic origin of the Semites in Amuru and upon the supposedly late rise and development of civilization in that land. The discoveries made since 1909, when the present writer first contested this position, clearly shows that we have reasons for believing that the civilization of the Western Semites synchronizes with the earliest that has been found in Babylonia and Egypt. More recently, prior to this being written and published probably, the writer had shown that the theory must be abandoned that the so-called Egypto-Babylonian culture brought forth the earliest civilization in the 1,000 years between 4000 and 3000 BC, while all the rest of the world continued to live in Stone Age barbarism or savagery. For there is every reason to believe that in Amuru, with its natural agriculture districts over widespread areas, such as those about Het, Aleppo, Haran, etc., with its wonderfully wooden districts, as in the Lebanon region, with its mines and natural products, which in ancient times, as at present, have been so attractive for other peoples, and also in Elam with its valleys so well adapted, etc., etc. There is another very important fact which the old version has revealed, and that is the occurrence of Ilu, or Ilu, God, in the title of the series, as well as in the text for the foremost deity's name. This title was originally incorrectly read Enuma Salu Welum, and since translated many times when a man lay down to sleep. But Ilu is perfectly clear on the tablet in the legend's context and in the colophon. Ilu, God, here takes the place of An or An in the early Semitic and Sumerian text, and of Anu of later text. The ideogram An in the early period in nearly all such connections has been generally read Anu or Ana. It is well known that the God whose name was written with the sign An, God, was the highest of the gods who had created mankind, and who was worshipped as the supreme ruler of the universe. In the text here published, we learn that the Western Semites in this early period called the Godhead Ilu, or El, God, the same as in the Old Testament. And there can be little doubt but that in the early period the Akkadians did the same. It is not impossible that the Sumerians, before they came to Babylonia, called their foremost deity Ana or Anna, but there is no proof of this. To the writer it seems more probable that after they had conquered the land and created or furnished the people with the cuneiform syllabary, they wrote An, which in their language meant heaven, as well as Dingur, God, for the name of the most high God of the Semites, namely Ilu. Certainly in the early syllabaries, An represented Ilu. In time, An became Semitized into Anu. Semitized into Anu, in the same way that Enlil, Lord of the Storm, became Elil. Enlil, Lord of the Storm, became Elil. It is also not improbable that the West Semitic Anu Ilu, whose influence was so extensively felt in the West, even in Egypt, is the origin of the Erekian Anu. Moreover, we know for certainty that while Anu of Erek, or today's modern Iraq, later generally replaced Ilu, this fact was fully appreciated by later generations when they used Anu and Antu with the generic sense of God and Goddess. The reading Anu or An in the initial line of the Hammurabi Code is being very generally adopted, but it is a mistake. When Anu of Erek is referred to in the code, his name is written Anum or Num. Whereas the chief's deity name, the father of the gods, who together with Elil, as Hammurabi says, raised the towers of Babylon, is written Elu An. This clear-cut distinction must be recognised. Moreover, the present text containing Elu, as well as hundreds of personal names belonging to this early period, compounded with Elu, and other facts clearly show that the Western Semites, as well as the early Akkadians, used the word Elu, God, to represent the creator and supreme ruler. Naturally, this fully confirms the impression we get from the Old Testament that the Semites in the land called Amuru by the Babylonians, which included Aram, used the word El U or El U to designate the Most High God, their El Elyon. Okay, but according to the translator, Victor N. Alexander, it's El, it's not El, because El is a pagan Canaanite god, right? El is the real name of God, apparently, not El.
Well, we believe that you've probably got the general gist of what we're trying to get at. That the said ancient myths of the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians came from the Amuru or the Amorites, i.e. the Hebrew language. We're going to leave it there. You can go and look at the video yourself, the book yourself. We'll leave a link to it, or you can basically find it on internetarchive.org, but we'll leave the link so you can find it. If you liked this, and it really helps you to understand again that all these myths, cuneiform myths from the Akkadians, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, etc., originated with the Hebrews from the Hebrew language, not the other way around. Subscribe to our channel, give us a like, add your comments below, and then we'll get back to you on those as soon as we can. And you go share this revelation with all your friends, family, neighbours, church friends, etc., who may be under the illusion that all these ancient myths preceded the Hebrew and that they adopted and adapted them as we thought, we were led to believe by others, or inspired by others to believe over the years, when it actually came from the Hebrews in the Hebrew language, the Chaldeans, etc., prior to these civilizations.